that.
Hello and welcome to the Bedroom Studios podcast, the podcast where we talk about what goes on behind the scenes in a musician's world and bridge the industry gap by bringing their stories, expertise, and advice to early career artists. Subscribe to join us for a fun chat about life as a creative person, tips and tricks for pursuing an artistic career, navigating the music industry, and more. I am your host, Emma, and today I will be interviewing Jordana Goddard. Canadian-American soprano Jordana Solstice Goddard is an award-winning artist whose musical passion has led her to critically acclaimed performances across Canada and Europe. Miss Goddard has graduated from the University of Toronto after studying with Dr. Darryl Edwards and is pleased to be continuing her studies in a master's degree in opera performance. With generous scholarship support from the BC Arts Council and the University of Toronto, she has worked extensively with world-renowned collaborative pianist Rachel Andrist, award-winning collaborative pianist Joel Goodfellow, Canadian Opera Company chorus master Sandra Horst, soprano Nathalie Paulin, and baritone Russel Braun. Highlights of her undergraduate degree include performing several world premieres and performing her first lead role in an opera with UofT Opera and attending VOSI Opera Kelowna. I had such a fun and interesting conversation with Jordana. We spoke a lot about how singers and musicians connect with their bodies and how, as a singer, it is so important to be in tune with yourself both physically and mentally. I hope you enjoy episode 5 of the Bedroom Studios podcast with our guest, Jordana Goddard. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here.
As sort of an intro to our conversation, I'd love for you to share your musical journey and how did you become interested in music and what led you to where you are now.
Totally. So I'm really privileged because I come from like a upper middle class white family to begin with. And then I'm even more privileged because both of my parents are professional musicians. And so within that, that's basically how I got introduced to classical music. And that was from a really young age. I listened to Wagner's Ring Cycle at probably before I knew how to speak. And I loved that so much. And that's kind of how I fell in love with opera. Mm-hmm. So it was very young. And I just listened to that opera on repeat. Like, I loved it so much. I could tell you all the leitmotifs. I could play them on the piano. Like, I knew a lot about it at a very young age. So I was part of that cult following right from the start. Yeah, so that was kind of the start of my musical journey. And then I was introduced to the violin when I was like 4, and then I continued that until I was about 13. And intermittently I would have other instruments, like I played trumpet in band for a bit, and then in high school I played French horn in the band.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that was really fun. I love the French horn. Yeah. But when I was 11, I started voice lessons, and I had my first performance, and I realized, just how vulnerable it is, first of all, and how much I liked playing with text, and that these melodies were often reused from another melody. And people had these memories connected to them, and I could play with that. And I just felt like I had so much control in another way. And then I could still play with musicality and all the other things that I could use as an instrumentalist. But I just felt like it was a little bit closer to what I wanted for expression. And it was definitely an adjustment, and I'm still finding things that I need to get used to, because from this instrumentalist background, it can be a little bit a little bit of an interesting world, because you've got this instrument that's inside you that you can't look at or really analyze, and you're basically creating your instrument while you're playing your instrument. And that's just such a weird concept. So singers can often be a little neurotic, because you don't know, like, you have to be in the right headspace to be able to produce your sound. It's just so strange. So I find that cool. And so since high school, I continued I continued lessons throughout high school, and in like grade 9 or 10, I decided I would really go for voice. And so I was pretty serious my entire high school kind of experience. And then I auditioned for UofT as well as other universities, and I got in. So I went to UofT, yeah. And then, I had a beautiful experience in my bachelor's, and lots of performing opportunities. And as a performance major, it was like basically handed to me on a silver platter. So it was easy to find performing opportunities, and I made friends with composers. And I love performing new music, so that was another something I discovered. And also because my dad is the composer in residence for the VSO, Vancouver Symphony Orchestra, I learned a lot just by being his kid about like all the work that goes into being a composer, and just a love of new music.
Very cool.
Thanks.
I had no idea you came from an instrumental background.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like with everyone I talk to, I just subconsciously assume that they've been doing what they've been doing since they were really little.
Yeah.
Just because how talented you guys are.
Thanks.
Yeah, you mentioned your vulnerability when you perform for voice, and I noticed, like, especially with you when you perform, it's almost like you're an actor and you take on a character. Was that something that sort of came naturally to you, or did you have to work at that?
Yeah, I think a bit of both. I think my brain works in a funny way that I really like focusing on characters and like really visual stories for myself. And that I find when I have a really specific visual kind of image or like movie playing in my head, it comes across quite well. So I try my best to create that for everything I perform. And there is kind of a different like philosophy or train of thought, or maybe just a different brain that focuses on more of the sound world and like being a vessel for the music. And I think that's so interesting as well. So I've been like playing a lot with like trying to get into that other headspace. But I think what naturally comes to me is that movie. And that's what I kind of think of when I'm listening to other people sing or play. I've got this kind of like this movie playing, trying to understand what they're trying to express. So, and I've had to work on it a bit. And I love acting so much. I've done Shakespeare for like since I was in third grade. I just like fell in love with it. So that has a big influence on my performing, I think.
Yeah, like I know for me as a flute player, like in my lessons we would talk a lot about, you know, how do you express this character? How are you going to shape this line? But it's all just reflected in the sound. Like I don't have to worry about, am I looking up to the right or down to the left? And what am I doing with my hands? Like I'm just playing flute. Like you don't have to worry about that. But like, do you find that you have to be just like super self-aware of not just what you're doing with your voice, but just every part of your body? Do you feel super self-aware when you're singing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something I've gotten used to now a little bit more, but it is really strange, like not having something to hold, like an instrumentalist. Like playing the violin was like, just like, okay, you got this thing and you're just gonna play it because that's what you do. And you can absolutely be expressive with your body in some ways.
Yeah, it's like just lean this way, lean that way, and that's it.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, so expressive.
Yeah. Yeah, so with singing, there are so many more minute details you can get, just like with the placement of your hands by your side. Like, are they open? Are they closed? Do you have fists? Are you kind of like rising with your arms? Like, are you kind of expressing something inward? Like, there's so much opportunity for expression, and that could be really daunting. Yeah. Because what do you choose for every phrase? And it'll always change. And in performance, sometimes I'm like, sometimes I start completely still. And I realized in my recital even, I like started a fast piece, Exultate Jubilate by Mozart. I started it with my hands by my sides, which is not a bad way to start, but I realized how much I wanted to use my arms and things. So kind of halfway through I was like, no, you can use your arms, Jordana. Like there's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, that's what I did. And I think playing with that in performance is super fun for me. So, yeah.
When you perform, do you sort of choreograph your movements prior?
Sometimes. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I have like kind of a map of what I want to create. And like often because the movie plays in a similar way each time, I'll have similar movements. But sometimes I even improv during the performance, and that's really thrilling for me. Yeah. I really like it, especially when it actually works out and it's like expressive in the way I wanted it to be expressive. And some people hate that. Some people hate that for art song. Like, especially art song, because it's such a pure art, and it is in ways, but it's also like, from my background that's German, I know that art song is like for the people. It's just like, it starts out as songs you sing in rooms full of people, and it's very relaxed, but you've got this beautiful story you're telling. And so you want to do that as well as possible. And I think sometimes movements can totally enhance that. And I think if we're limiting ourselves to not having movements and only the text and only the story, I think that's just a little bit close-minded. So I like to be open.
Yeah, I guess it sort of operates on a spectrum where sometimes I can only really speak from like my flute experience, but I've had conversations with my teacher because I just tend to move a lot when I play, and sometimes that inhibits my sound because I'm moving the flute too much. Right. And so when I'm like more grounded, then I'm able to express more through the sound. But like other times, it's like if you're too stiff, and it just feels like the sound is only coming like from your mouth outwards as opposed to it being embodied in you. It's an interesting thing. to
Yeah.
sort of play around with.
Totally. And I think like probably like you, I'm a very kind of physical person.
Yeah.
And I have like, it takes a lot to ground myself sometimes.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So, I think I get those comments as well, like that I can just like stay still and stay grounded. And I think for some pieces, it's super important to be like completely still and like be able to express a line with just like this calm and tranquility that it needs. So it's absolutely like based on what's appropriate, but I think what's appropriate varies from artist to artist, and that's like the cool thing about it.
Yeah, I always find or not always, but usually I find that when I'm singing in front of people, sometimes I get sort of stiff and frozen because I'm afraid to, like, if I move my arm, will it look weird, or
Right.
It's still something I have to get comfortable with. And yeah, it's like I like your analogy of the movie in your head.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think it can be totally more awkward for the performer if you think about it than the audience. Like, I think often if you kind of just relax into your like being and your position as a performer, it's like I'm gonna allow myself to be comfortable because that will make the audience comfortable. It's the little weird psychological thing, but a lot of performing and a lot of singing is super psychological. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like giving yourself permission to be comfortable. I like that.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
Thanks.
And I guess it's even more important when you're a singer because tension.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, anything can create tension.
Yeah, and I carry so much tension in my entire body. It's an issue.
Same.
Yeah. So I guess this sort of leads nicely into another question, which was, since your voice is part of you, how do you maintain it, especially when you're performing a lot?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think warming up is super important, and I make that one of the top priorities in a singing day. Obviously, sometimes there are times where you just can't for whatever reason, but I think warming up sets me up for like whatever singing day I have. And the way I warm up and the breaths I take are gonna dictate how I sing that day. And it's crazy how much of an effect it has. And so if I'm really conscious during my warm-ups and I take really good breaths and I release well, and I'm gentle with myself at first, I think that creates sounds that I love during the rest of the day, rather than having like a really rushed warm up where I like try to go higher than is good for me at the very beginning, or try to push, or take kind of held breaths. That'll create a completely different sound during the rest of the day. And obviously, like, sometimes I can have like a short warm up and it's okay, but I find having a longer warm up and doing a few like little technique things and little exercises can be super helpful to kind of release different parts of my voice and and give me more access to more means of expression.
Wow, I love the words that you use to describe releasing parts of my voice. Like that's so poetic. But it's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, I find that for a lot of people the breath is something that gets neglected for both singers and instrumentalists. Mm-hmm. Before you warm up, do you literally just breathe for a bit, or is it something that you integrate into your warm up?
Sometimes, yeah. I think, sometimes I do like a bit of stretching, like that can really help because of the way the breath works. Like, it's very physical. And like, I think sometimes we forget about that, or at least I forget about that. And so like doing some stretches and even stretching out my legs and doing some arm exercises can really help. And even on performance days, something I love to do is go for a run in the morning, like just kind of an easy run, like 20 minutes or like up to like half an hour or 45 minutes, but just like a good, like easy pace, nothing race pace or anything like that. And because that just gets the breath totally released and automatic. And then you've got this starting point that's a lot more grounded. And I find I can find my groundedness and like that energy without all the tension. It's just kind of like a buzz. And it's so cool. I love that.
Nice.
Yeah.
As a singer, do you have to maintain, I guess, certain lifestyle habits in order to do your job, essentially?
Yeah, I need to make sure that, depending on what kind of day I have, the night before, if there's like kind of a social gathering, I might choose not to drink alcohol so that the next day I am totally fresh, because alcohol does have an effect on the cords, as well as caffeine and cheese and lack of sleep and whether you have your period or not, and like even just what your mental state is. It's kind of crazy how sensitive our bodies are, and I think singers definitely feel we're programmed to feel like more, because having an awareness of what's happening in our vocal cords kind of branches out to an awareness of our entire body. So usually there's a hyper awareness compared to like most other people who just kind of go about their day and maybe they're tired, but it doesn't really affect their work quite as much. So yeah, I think there's a lot that we have to look out for, and it totally changes depending on the singer. Like some singers can have like lots of coffee before performing and it doesn't really affect them. I actually love to have a cup of coffee in the morning, so if as long as I have a pretty chill day, with like no performing in like at noon, for instance, like if I have a noon hour at UofT, I won't have a coffee in the morning because that would be a little bit too jittery for that hour of the day. But if I have a performance in the evening, I can have a coffee in the morning and it won't really affect me too much.
So I've never actually heard anyone talk about it at all, but I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on like how your period affects your singing, because I know for me it does a lot. Like I feel so much tighter and like I can't sing as well. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, I think there's a lot that can be really annoying about that. But I actually found the last time I had a performance on my period was actually my graduation recital. And I was like, not to be TMI, but I was like on my third day. And
I think we've already passed the point.
I think we've already passed that though, yeah. So, yeah, but I was on my third day, so it was like well into all the hormonal changes. And I remember having a lesson with my professor that morning, and feeling like, like why do I have to sing on my period? Like this is so annoying. And then he kind of guided me to like embrace that kind of that kind of richer tone, because it's for me it changes to a much warmer tone, and like most of the month my tone and my sound is quite bright, and it's quite forward and quite like sparkly in the like the higher overtones. And so during my period I have like a little bit less sparkle on the top, and it gets a little bit like a darker and warmer, and I'm just like not used to that, even though it might be a really beautiful sound to other people. I'm just like totally weirded out. And I also love sopranos who sound like a lot warmer and darker and richer, so it's a funny thing. So that day I was like, oh my gosh, wait, this is just something I'm unfamiliar with. It's not that it's bad or it's like not beautiful. So I totally kind of embraced that kind of warmer, richer sound, and I leaned into those like lower overtones, and like I think I like that sound sometimes more than my usual sound, which is really funny. But it can be difficult sometimes, like especially on like heavier like sometimes periods are like very light and you don't feel much, like many changes, and then sometimes it's just like your hormones just hit you like a truck, and it's just like your throat is like, it feels like really swelled up and stuff, so that can be really annoying. And then if you don't have like immaculate technique, then like things can feel wrong really quickly. And like the fact of the matter is like the vocal cords are a little bit more inflamed during periods, so that can cause a little bit of stress, if not like pain. So that can be unpleasant.
I really like what you were saying about embracing how you're sounding. There's a video online of a comedian talking about the period commercials where it's like, it's okay, go ride a horse, go run a marathon, right? And it's like sort of that messaging of you should be able to do everything that you usually do in the exact same way, with the exact like same result. And so it's like to embrace how you're sounding and lean into it. And like I really like that framing of it.
Thanks. Yeah, and of course like I think it's really good to take a break too. And like if you can. And obviously some people, like sometimes you just have to keep on going, and for better or for worse. And but like opera houses used to let like female identifying artists like take breaks during their period, and that was amazing. Like that just kind of let them rest and not use their voice, because singing for like, if you're singing for 4 hours of Wagner opera, obviously with breaks, but if you're singing for long periods of time, it might actually like be a little bit damaging, and that's not something you want. And if opera houses are hiring you for specific sound, and if your hormones just like really change that, then that's against them too. It's like, why wouldn't you let your soprano off for a week or two and then just like have her back later? But that's something that's a little bit more from the past. But I think there's a lot of value, like whatever people choose, there's value on either side. And I think it's gorgeous to kind of embrace that like different color if you can. And then if you need a break, that's totally like, it's good. Yeah.
I don't know if this is embarrassing if I don't know this, but I'm sure a lot of people don't know this, maybe, who knows. But I recently learned it's not just like the 1 week of your period. Every week of that cycle there's different things happening, different hormones are being released, and
Yeah.
it's like I didn't know that, and like there's things where it's like on this week, on this stage of the cycle, this is where you'll have a lot more energy, and you know, you should like do more social things, and then this week it's like, you kind of experience the dip in energy, so you should do like these types of exercises or eat these types of foods. And that was so interesting and eye-opening to me.
Totally.
And it's like sometimes hard because just the way everything is structured, like sometimes, you know, you'll have a performance on a specific day and it doesn't align with the amount of like I think I was on my period during the last week of school where I had like all my exams and I had my jury and I was just like completely exhausted by the end of it. I feel like having that awareness of how your body works is so helpful. Wish they taught us that in school.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there are so many things going on, and yeah, it's so interesting to look deeper in that and like become a little bit more self-aware of like, oh, what's going on? Like, what do I feel? Like, how can I best take care of myself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Singing is such a cool entry point into learning about your own body because of how self-aware you have to be.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's definitely changed my relationship to myself and my body and even my psychology and like how I deal with like negative self-talk and stuff. Like when I practice, I'm really conscious usually. Like I try my best to kind of remain like a sports coach. Like my self-talk, and I talk to myself a lot, like out loud when I practice. I'm like, Jordana, you can do better than that. You can take a better breath. Like you can do it. I know you can. And so I want you to do it. Like,
I love that. No, that's awesome.
And thanks. Yeah. And it's really helped me kind of like remain like on task, but also like positive and also just, like hold myself accountable that like I don't need to like freak out. This isn't the end of the world. Just because I can't hit that high note the way I want to right now doesn't mean I'm not going to have a career. I just need to work a little bit harder right now and just stay on task. And if I want to come back to that later, that's fine too.
I like the analogy of a sports coach. No one's like, oh, go run a marathon tomorrow. You haven't trained. You'll be fine. Like, no, you gotta train and you gotta work up to it. And
exactly.
Like, sometimes with music, we can forget that we're literally building muscles. They're just really small muscles.
Exactly. Yeah, my mom likes to call it Olympians of small muscles.
My teacher says the exact same thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Because all these things affect it so much, like the way we talk to ourselves. It can sort of make or break a practice session.
Totally. Yeah, and I think I get like easily in my head and really
me
easily
too.
like, yeah, it's just like if I let my brain take over and like my negative self-talk take over, I'm like in tears within minutes. It's just like and so it's so much healthier and so much more productive if I'm just like, hey, no, you can do this. You don't need to worry.
Yeah.
You're good. Yeah.
I guess this is sort of like a pivot to more of what we were talking about earlier. Have there ever been times where, because I'm sure this kind of awareness comes with a lot of trial and error. So has there ever been times where like, I'm going to see if I can perform while like having coffee and did it, like, have you ever had that experience?
Absolutely. I mean, I've had... so, like, one of my experiences last year was that I was on a movie set the night before, and I thought it would be just, like, until, like, 11 or maybe midnight. It turned out to be the entire night until 6 in the morning. We didn't wrap until 6. And so I had a performance for a noon hour the next day. I was kind of, I was just going to take whatever I could get, like, and I was really kind of easy on myself in that way. Like, before the performance, I was like, okay, like, you just do whatever you do, and whatever it is, you're going to be fine. Like, we're going to get through this. And it turned out to be, like, one of the best performances I've had of that aria. And it was just, like, so automatic and so kind of, I'm not going to think about being self-conscious. Like, my self-conscious filter was completely gone. And so that lack of sleep completely let me explore this other part of myself that could just do that automatically. And that was really impressive for me. But
and I never would have guessed that you didn't sleep the night before, because it was spectacular.
Thank you.
It was so good,
much.
like, literally.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, I was equally as surprised.
Yeah.
I thought like, if I got through the aria, that would be fine.
Yeah.
But it was, like, so much fun. Mind you, I'm not going to do that every performance. So yeah, but I'm happy it happened.
It was the choice that you made to just focus on what you could do, and if it didn't go well, it didn't go well, right?
Absolutely.
I've also had those lack of sleep performances, and there have been times where it was like it went well, but then there have been times where I was focusing so much on, like, I'm so tired, I don't know if I can do this, I'm so nervous. And it didn't go as well because I was using what limited brain capacity I had to be nervous about the performance.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think in those mental states, you can choose to think about, like, two things at the same time.
Yeah.
And whatever you choose to think about is, like, where the energy is going to go. And, like, you don't have that ability to kind of branch out and, like, be nervous as well as do the performance, as well as be expressive, and then, like, do all the markings that the composer has written down. And yeah,
it's like something's got to suffer there.
Exactly.
So it might as well be the nerves that suffer.
Yeah, exactly. And I found in that performance I was so zoned in. It was, like, crazy. So I think that was exactly it, though. Like,
Yeah.
you've hit the nail on the head. It's like, as musicians, we are trained to have, like, this gorgeous spider senses of, like, and think about all the things that we need to think about at the same time. And it's kind of amazing when you, like, remove some of those and just, like, decide, I'm not going to think about being nervous right now, or what my mental state is, or my lack of sleep. And it takes a huge amount of control to not put energy towards those. And sometimes it's impossible. But I think with a lot of practice, getting in the zone is, like, something that is so valuable. Yeah.
What you were saying reminded me of, I was watching a master class at UofT, and Timothy Hagen, who is a flute player who's working with some of the flute students, and the master class was sort of framed on how to practice effectively. And something that really stuck with me was sometimes when we're practicing, we do, and it's good to have this hyper awareness of everything that you're doing and all of the elements that make up what you're playing and how you sound and how you're phrasing and your technique. But something he was doing with the students was he was asking them, okay, what do you want when you play this phrase? What are you listening for? What do you want to work on? And they would choose one thing, and it's like, okay, so only focus on that one thing. Like, if you mess up a note, it's fine. If you're
right,
you know, if anything else goes wrong, it's okay. But like, really just evaluate yourself on that one thing. If I'm trying to play around with technique, but I'm like so focused on, like, oh, am I sounding good? Then it takes away energy from what I'm actually trying to accomplish.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, yeah, that's such a cool way of thinking.
Yeah, it
And
was
I
such
think,
a crazy, it was so good. It was such a great masterclass.
yeah, it sounds amazing. Yeah, I think when we decide to only think about one thing, that can get so much better. And obviously we're human and we're going to be picky about everything at the same time, and it's like, why would you do that to yourself? But
Yeah.
yeah, it can be so valuable to do that. That's amazing.
And sometimes when I perform, you know how you get that out of body experience sometimes?
Yeah.
Sometimes I get that out of body experience, but it'll be weird because I'll be playing, I'll be like, huh, I'm performing right now, and
Yeah.
I'm playing this part of this piece, and it's gonna be
Yeah.
over soon. Like, I'm thinking about that, which I feel like, I don't know, it's such a weird feeling because I'm zoned in, but I'm also not zoned in. And
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of meditative.
a little bit. Yeah, if you know the
Yeah.
piece well enough, if you don't know the
Totally.
piece, then it's just like, what am I doing?
Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah.
When you're practicing, how do you practice in a way that prepares you for the performance?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Sometimes, so like something that Barbara Hannigan has mentioned she does is that she will practice without singing by just playing her part on the piano or listening. I don't think listening, actually. Playing her part on the piano and learning it by ear first, and then starting to sing it when she's got it basically memorized. And that's something I've been playing with a lot, and I think it's absolutely a luxury of time. So if I've got that amount of time, I'll definitely try to do things like that and make it so that my vocal technique is completely at ease, and I don't have to like learn it with my voice, because that puts kind of an extra strain on the voice because it's not sure about what the next note should be or not be. And so that can be really good.
And you end up using your voice a lot when you don't necessarily have to.
Exactly. Yeah. So if I'm able to not use my voice as much and just learn the rep without using my voice, then I can just work on technique and make sure the sound is what I want. And often, like, something I can do a lot that's like after I've learned the piece, and maybe even after I've performed it. Like, I was doing this recently with some pieces I was performing for the house concert I was giving. I was just focusing on phrasing and just playing it on the piano. And something I've really valued over the last few years is like listening to the sound in my head that I want. So just like hearing my voice just in my head without singing and reproducing that sound many times in my head. And then until I can really hear that sound, then I can start to sing it. And then it's almost exactly what I want usually. It's pretty insane, like
That's so cool.
Yeah, the power of our minds.
Yeah.
So, especially when I'm going through coloratura stuff, often when I'm having trouble with the coloratura section, I'll just stop singing it and then play it on the piano slowly first. And then often I find that the parts I have the most difficulty on, I couldn't actually hear it in my head. Like I couldn't, like I didn't have it quite there. And so of course, like how could you play anything if you can't hear it? Like, so that's kind of what I work on mostly. And when I really can hear it in my head and hear it exactly the way I want it and exactly the tempo I want it, then I can start to sing it. And then it almost is completely perfect the first time. But then I can totally grow with it. And yeah, so it's really fun.
That's something like my private teacher gives us, like, have you listened to the recording? I'm like, maybe. can you sing your part? I'm like, okay. It's like, if you don't know it, it's so obvious that you don't know it, because then you're guessing.
Totally. Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's like, I totally agree with you. If, like, when I know the melody in my head, then I learn the piece so much faster.
Yeah, totally. And that's so cool with instrumentalists, like, that you guys get to have like an instrument first, and then your teachers often tell you to sing, and it's like, oh my gosh, what? No, I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah,
I totally
it's like, had
that as well.
I think it's easier to fake it with an instrument when you don't know, because you could just sight read it. But when you're at the same time, it's, if you don't have the melody in your head, then even if you're so good at sight reading, it's like, still going to be some elements of surprise to you if you're reading your piece. And it's like, if you don't understand what the piano part's doing, the piano part's not, it's like, I know a lot of vocal music, it's the vocal line and then the piano is written underneath. Yeah. But there's so many pages with like flute music and other other instrument music, so we don't have the piano line there. So we actually have to look at it separately.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah, it's funny how, like, that's such a different world.
I know that what some people do is when they have their music on the tablet, and so they'll read their music off of the piano score, and then they're able to flip the page as much as they want with the foot pedal.
Oh, nice.
Or Leslie Newman once, she said to the class that when she's playing in an orchestra, she'll have the full score on her tablet, and then she could flip with the foot pedal and see her line, but also be able to see everything else that's going on underneath.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's something else I've actually learned from Barbara Hannigan, that when you go in to sing with an orchestra, always have the full score. And so I've continued that, and I've definitely kept that in my head, and like I've done that. And like, so for the Vancouver Symphony performance, I brought the full scores of both of the works I was performing, and it was just like so much more helpful than just having your part. So it was amazing.
Yeah. Can you tell me more about that? Because that's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it was an all new music program, and it was performed in the Annex Theatre, which is like right next door to the Orpheum. So it had a slightly smaller ensemble, but still pretty big for one of the pieces. And so I performed a piece by Zosha Di Castri, who is a Canadian composer. And this piece was called Sulla mappa concava del buio. And it was really complicated, very interesting. And it kind of surrounded the themes of kind of searching, kind of anxiety at first, and a feeling of neuroticism. I really got that. And then I think also a searching for release. And then there's this huge release moment in the middle. And the last part is kind of feels like an acceptance of it. There's no real like philosophical storyline, and there aren't that many words that I actually sing. But there's poetry that's spoken throughout on a recording. And so it's a really interesting emotional piece, and it's really dense. I love new music in that way. Yeah. And then the second piece we performed was David Lang's Simple Song Number 3, and that was in the movie Youth by Paolo Sorrentino, and that was like just a gorgeous melody and gorgeous orchestral part. You should really listen to it. It's so beautiful. So yeah, check it out on Spotify.
Awesome. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, congratulations.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it was so much fun. They're just like incredible musicians. And so, yeah, it was amazing performing with them.
Must be such a different experience to sing with an orchestra as opposed to just with piano. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, like I had a bit of an experience, well, a pretty big experience with the opera in the spring, which was amazing. I got to perform the lead role with like the rest of the opera department, because Emily Rocha was so amazing in letting me have one of the nights. But so I got to perform with orchestra then, but I think I didn't quite like register how amazing it was during the moment and like how good the orchestra sounded. It was just like, you're on, and like so I was just like focused on like what I was producing and all that. So yeah, but with the VSO, it was just like I got to really kind of lean into that and fall in love really with like performing with orchestra. And so it was a really good experience because I think I felt a little bit more comfortable. And yeah, and it was a bunch of people I knew in the orchestra as well because of my parents, and so it was great.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
So I think we're kind of getting to the end of our talk. So sad. But is there something that you know now that you would tell yourself when you were first starting out, or like what resource do you wish you had at the beginning?
That's a good question. I think that negative self-talk thing is really good, and that's really changed my life. And I think the way I think about myself is, and the way we think about ourselves in general is like really important and will change our lives, and will change the lives of those around us too, because the way we think about ourselves has so much of an effect on the way we interact with other people. And when we allow ourselves to like be human and like have emotions and make mistakes and do things in ways that we wouldn't do, and like and have negative experiences and learn from them and see them as opportunities rather than as like failures, then yeah, there can be so much beauty and so much growth. And whether that's like in a specific direction of like quote unquote success, like it doesn't really matter. I think kind of whatever direction you go is successful. And I think having a career in music can be like a beautiful way of showing that. But I think a love of music is completely different than a career in music. And I think you can love music so much, and have a gorgeous relationship to it and yourself and other people. And like, that can be all the beauty you need, and you don't need to show the world by having a career. And that's really beautiful too. So there are so many options, and I think sometimes in the music world we kind of see this hierarchical thing of like the performers are at the top, and it's like, no, you don't really need to perform to be like amazing.
Yeah.
And to have this like really gorgeous relationship to music. You can like teach music as like you've been trained to do. And that is so important too. Like educating young people is where it all starts. And so that's a really important job. And then having your own like practicing relationship to music is super important too. And being an avid listener to music is another relationship that's super important. So I think there are so many possibilities, and yeah, having that open to us and like allowing ourselves to see it not in a hierarchical way, but like on a spectrum is really important. And I think performing can be for everyone, and it's just a sharing of music. It's not like, oh, because this person is a star, they can perform better than me. It's like, no, they're just expressing it in a different way. And so, yeah.
I love that.
Thanks.
That was so beautiful.
Thanks.
I love that. And I think like what you were saying about the self-talk and the self-love, it's sort of, when you have a good relationship with yourself, it just radiates to everything around you and what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the last question is, do you have any music recommendations that you would like to share?
Oh my goodness. Well, lately I've been hooked on Jesse Norman's 4 Last Songs, and that's just an incredible recording the whole way through, as well as Mahler 5 with Zubin Mehta and the New York Philharmonic. That's just an incredible recording too. So those two are definitely ones to check out, in my opinion. So much richness, so much expression.
Very cool. Thanks for being on the podcast. I'm so happy that we got to chat, because we don't always get too many opportunities to chat like this when we're in school, but I had the most amazing time.
Oh, me too. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Bedroom Studios podcast. Don't forget to add this podcast to your playlists and to like and follow for future episodes. And you can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify at Bedroom Studios Podcast. I will also be linking Jordana's social media in the description. You should definitely check out her music and her performances. It is truly spectacular. Also, make sure to follow our playlist of guest music recommendations, which will also be linked in the description. I'll see you in the next episode of Bedroom Studios Podcast.